So when did we meet in Scotland?
I
Did
think
we?
I think we were in the same office and never met.
How about that? Look at us now. We're at the top of the world, Rob. Top of the world. Hello and welcome to day 30 of Trump 100 with me, James Matthews, and today with a special guest.
Hi, I'm Rob Crilly, Chief US Political Correspondent for the Daily Mail.
Welcome, Rob. It's President's Day here in the United States, a bank holiday. So this is a special holiday edition of Trump 100 starring you. Tell me, how are you finding the Trump beat?
Well, thank goodness it's a holiday today because I've finally been able to catch my breath. He's packed a heck of a lot into 30 days, and I think we're all pretty exhausted already, aren't we?
Is it you that coined the drinking from a fire hose phrase?
Well, we're not drinking from a fire hose. We're getting smacked around the face by a fire hose would be the way I would put it.
Okay, well, listen, in a bit we'll be taking a closer look at what's been going on today in terms of US involvement in the Russia-Ukraine peace talks. But first, Rob, you're just back from Europe. You were flying with JD Vance, the Vice President. We'll get to the speech that he delivered, but talk to us first about the travel, the trappings, being a journalist on tour with a VP.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extraordinary chance to get inside the bubble and see really up close what's going on, talk to his advisors, talk to his officials. There's only a small number of people in the presidential pool or the vice presidential pool. And this is your chance to really get a sense for who they are, get some unguarded moments, see them go about their work. Really, really invaluable reporting.
Yeah, what do you see of Vance? How close do you get?
This was super interesting. I traveled with him on the campaign and got to sit down with him, interview him a couple of times, was with him when he walked across the tarmac. Just by coincidence, he was in the same place as Kamala Harris when she was on Air Force Two. And he walked across the tarmac to go and find her pool of traveling journalists to make the point that she wasn't talking to the journalists with her. Well, fast forward a few months, JD Vance didn't want to interact with us either. He actually stayed away from us. He had his family with him, almost like a human shield, I would say. And I think the problem for Vance is his boss is incredibly unpredictable and mercurial. The vice president speaks to us about something with no idea whether the president's just said something different 5 minutes earlier or is about to contradict him. So it felt actually from this that Vance, having been the attack dog on the campaign trail, was in almost a bit of a defensive crouch, a bit of a holding pattern.
Yeah, does that tell us anything about the relationship between the two?
I think it does. I mean, first of all, it's pretty clear that Vance will have this role of messenger, getting out and about while Trump is at the White House doing deals, signing executive orders. Trump picked Vance because they were very much in alignment on MAGA, American First, policy issues. And also Trump liked the look of Vance and the way he performed on Fox News. But we've just seen such a whirlwind that it's impossible for anybody to keep up, first of all. And secondly, I've started to see the first signs of slight cracks. Some of the people who are close to both the president and Vance have told me there's been a slight cooling in their relationship. We've seen Elon Musk, for example, take on a much higher profile. So yeah, I think there's something interesting there.
The now famous Vance speech in Munich, where do you think that sits in that particular story?
I mean, it was a super interesting speech. And I think that I come back to, first of all, that was what Vance was sent to do, be Trump's messenger. And what we've seen as well is he laid out a sort of America First foreign policy structure in a way that Trump just can't do. I don't think he is able to structure a speech like that, even written for him, because he goes off on tangents and diversions. So I think what we saw was a little bit of what Vance's role will be, to be the sort of a bit of the thinker and the messenger. And it was a hugely controversial speech, but I think it did what Trump wanted it to do.
And Donald Trump, you have been close to him. You've interviewed him, spent time following him on the campaign trail and beyond. Talk to me about Donald Trump, the Donald Trump that you've come across.
Yeah, I mean, look, I see the same thing right now as everybody else is seeing, which is a man on a mission to get things done as quickly as possible. And I think this is a man who has worked out how he wants to go about business. And quite simply, a lot of this is about revenge now. This is a man who will allow people to apologize for their past statements about him. And as long as you're willing to make a deal with Trump, he will welcome you back into the fold. But I think what we're seeing now Very different to when I first interviewed him in the Oval Office 5, 6 years ago, and he really wasn't sure what his strategy was. He's got a very clear mission this time around. When I sat down to interview him in Mar-a-Lago, we were videoing it, and we were expressly asked to bring an extra monitor so that he could watch what the viewer was going to see. And of course, he immediately complained. He had the lighting one way, then the other. And it was, again, that he was in charge. Of course, we know TV production is one of the things he really prides himself on.
Yeah.
But the other thing I would say is he's a salesman, and he's a hotelier, and he treats you as his guest, and he wants to put you at ease. He'll make sure you have a bottle of water if that's what you want. And at the end, he will say, "Did you get everything you need?" And so there are different facets to him. I find him endlessly fascinating, and I'd love to delve more into his psychology, but that's something he never allows in these interviews. He sort of rejects any sort of personal questions, but there are lots of different facets to him, and I think what you see in public sometimes is what you get in private, but not always.
Yeah, he does aim to please. He wants you to go away satisfied, doesn't he? The very first time I interviewed him, he landed at St Andrews. He was on a recce, golf course recce. And of course, The Apprentice was all the rage at that time. And that was the big story about him. Landed in the helicopter, came across to the camera, and I asked him a couple of questions. And of course, wanted the "you're fired" down the barrel of the camera. So I said to him, fed on this line, I said, "And of course, Mr. Trump, if you weren't happy with anybody here or the prospects of, golf, you'd probably have a short message for them." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, yeah, probably would. Yeah, that'd be right." I said, "No. So if there was like a resignation in the air, you'd probably have a strong message for them, wouldn't you?" And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, yeah. I'd say you're fired." Get with the program, Donald.
I mean, he knows what you want, and he will give it to you.
He's a performer, certainly.
Eventually, yeah.
As we're speaking, Rob, President Trump, he's in Mar-a-Lago, probably enjoying some bank holiday golf. Yesterday, he was in Daytona Beach, Florida. He was there for a NASCAR race. As he arrived, he was asked this by journalists.
Sir, did you speak to Secretary Rubio this morning?
I did.
What is the latest with the negotiations in Saudi Arabia?
We're moving along. We're trying to get a peace with Russia, Ukraine, and we're working very hard on it. It's a war that should have never started.
Do you expect Zelensky to be involved in these conversations? What will his role be?
I do. He will be involved. Yes.
Donald Trump speaking there about his Secretary of State, essentially the U.S. Foreign Secretary Marco Rubio. He's landed in Riyadh ahead of talks with Russian officials over the Ukraine war. Crucially, Ukrainian officials have not been invited to that meeting, and European leaders, they've hastily arranged their own talks in Paris, focused on protecting Ukrainian interests. Marco Rubio, he says he's involved in preliminary talks and that Ukraine will be involved further down the line. Rob, if you were Zelensky, would you buy that?
No, not for a second. Here's the thing. There is going to be some sort of agreement hammered out. Trump has made clear he wants the fighting to stop in Ukraine. But last week, he kickstarted this with a 90-minute call, or nearly 90-minute call, to Vladimir Putin. And it was only after that he then got the Ukrainians involved. That's upended the Biden approach, which was always to talk to the Ukrainians first and only then talk to the Russians. And in fact, they didn't talk to the Russians much because it was all about isolating Russia. So what you're seeing is Russia being brought back into the international fold, and they've got a seat at the table when those first principles of what a peace might look like will be laid down. Yeah, if I was Zelensky, I'd be horrified.
So Keir Starmer, we've just heard him talking about the importance of an American backstop with regard to Ukraine. He's coming out here next week.
He wrote in the Telegraph today about sending British troops to be involved in the peacekeeping force. I messaged a senior official in the National Security Council of the White House today to ask for their response. What did they think of this proposal? The official asked me to send them Keir Starmer's comments. They were completely unaware of what he said. So look, Keir Starmer's coming out next week. Good luck to him, because he's going to have to try and get Trump talking to the Brits, the Europeans, the Ukrainians. But Trump is not the sort of guy that listens. He's got something in his head, and he's pushing ahead 100%.
Special relationship? Special no more?
Yeah, I mean, The Brits will tell you the special relationship is actually about military and intelligence cooperation, not about the broader political picture. I think we Brits care about it. I'm not sure the Americans think about it a lot, unfortunately.
Keith Kellogg, the man Trump had, in theory, placed in charge of the Ukraine brief, he's in Brussels today reassuring NATO allies that no deal will be enforced on Ukraine. Down the road in Paris, Emmanuel Macron is hosting a summit. They're calling it casual, but it's very much crisis, yeah?
Yeah. And I mean, look, America has made clear they're sick of Europe. They want to forge an entirely different transatlantic partnership with these extreme far-right parties that we're seeing bubbling up across the continent. Again, I'd say the White House doesn't really care what Macron or other European leaders think. Donald Trump is going to push ahead. We've seen it with Gaza, like his extraordinary plans to relocate millions of Palestinians from their homes. He's going to push ahead. He thinks he can do a deal with Putin.
Trump has long quoted the Saudis, the money, the power. He sees that as a key to ending the conflicts in the Middle East and in Ukraine. He also sees value for him, in business long term, I suppose. He's expected to speak at a big Saudi Arabia-backed business conference in Miami later this week. Whilst placing sizable tariffs on the EU, I wonder, do you think Trump is shifting alliances, American alliances, from Europe to the Middle East?
He's just interested in people that he thinks he can do business with. And when I say do business, I don't necessarily mean building Trump Towers everywhere, but that's clearly a part of it.
Yeah.
But he likes dealing with leaders who have complete control over their society, over their politics, and can deliver. He finds dealing with all the different competing and squabbling leaders in Europe time-consuming and problematic. He would much rather deal, with an MBS who can say what Saudi Arabia is going to do and then deliver it with an iron fist. The other point I would make is one of his key figures in the region now, his envoy to the Middle East, is Steve Witkoff, an old friend of his who's been on the scene for ages. He's a billionaire. He's a property developer. So again, the sort of person he thinks can find peace in the Middle East and is intimately involved in the Ukrainian negotiations is a property developer with no real experience in that part of the world other than building property. So again, I think that gives you an insight to how Trump goes about his business.
All right. Many thanks, Rob. But before you go, as two aging hacks, one of us aging quicker than the other, we are beholden to tell at least one war story before we finish this. Tell me something. Tell me a story you tell your pals about being a journalist.
Well, okay, this is my favorite one, and this is about being a British journalist in America, where American journalists don't tend to do these stupid things.
Yeah.
I got Trump's first comments to a journalist after leaving office in January 2021. Ask me what his first words were.
What were his first words?
Who are you, and how did you get in here?
That's journalism.
I knew that he was staying at Mar-a-Lago. I knew he'd be going to his golf club every day to play golf. So a friend of a friend was a member there, and I got him to take me for lunch. So I was able to turn up at his table, much to the consternation of his Secret Service agents. But I did get his first words.
I like your style. Rob, thanks. It's been our pleasure, and hopefully see you again.
Lovely to talk to you.
That's it for today. As always, please do follow the podcast wherever you're listening. And remember, you can email us on trump100@sky.uk. We'll be doing another Q&A episode at the end of the week, so please submit your questions for that. But that's it for day 30 of Trump 100. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.